Hi everyone. So I'm going to lead us through very quickly what we did this week in Photoshop. In case you need to review or in case you were absent one day, we're going to really quickly go through our Photoshop practice worksheet. So on your first and second page, you have questions 1 through 16. You also have a space for some additional notes. And then on the third page, there's some things that you're going to need to label, and that is questions 1 through 4. So I'm going to start with question number 5. Why would you want to make a new canvas? Well, you want to make a new canvas if you're going to make something like a photo collage or a poster or a flyer or advertisement, something kind of graphic design purpose there. So for your first project, you are going to be making a poster that's all about you. So you're going to make a new canvas. So the way that we do that, now we're on number 6. To create a new canvas, we're going to go to File, New. The shortcut for that is Control N, and it shows that right here next to File, New. It always lists the shortcuts. I want you guys to learn the shortcuts because that's how you're really going to be working in Photoshop. So File, New, and then this box is going to pop up and it's going to ask us about our settings. For the purpose of practicing, we're going to make sure that we have an 8.5 by 11 inch document. Over here, you can change the size of things or the measurement to pixels, centimeters, millimeters. We're going to work with inches because whenever I'm printing photos out, it will be based on inches. And we're going to do 11 width and 8.5 height. And over here where it says orientation, it's going to let you know the orientation. That's number 7 and 8 on your practice worksheet. Landscape orientation is how we are right now. If we switched it so that it was 8.5 wide and 11 inches tall, we'd have portrait orientation. So long and wide like a landscape or tall and skinny like a portrait. I want mine to be landscape orientation right now. So I'm going to do that. You can change down here the background color. I'm just going to leave it at white and I'm going to hit create. And then what I have now is a blank document that I can start working on. Number 9 asks how to unlock the background layer. The way that I do that is down here in my layers palette. This is my layers palette here. This is my little control panel for everything that I do in Photoshop. As you add more things to your canvas here, you're going to have more layers down here. So that's actually number 1 is to label your layers palette. That's this area here. So back to number 9, how to unlock the background layer. We're just going to click that lock icon and it's going to unlock it, and that just gives us a little more freedom to do some stuff with our document here. So we need to get an image on here now. So to get a picture here, I'm going to go to File, Open, or Control O is the shortcut for that. I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm just going to make my way to my Pictures folder, and I'm just going to grab a photo here to play with today. So I'm going to get my photo from here over to my canvas here. And to do that, I need to make sure I'm using the Move tool. That's this tool at the very top. It looks like a 4-pointed compass, an arrow pointing in every direction. That is part of number 3, to label the Move tool. We want to label the Move tool. This is the tool you're going to be using the most in Photoshop, and it will mess you up the most. Photoshop defaults to this tool, the rectangular marquee tool. We always want to use the Move tool. So to move my photo, I'm just going to click, hold, drag and drop it onto this canvas. And notice my mouse is here on the canvas and I'll let go. And I say that because if I try to click and drag and just onto the tab here, it's not going to do anything. So you have to make sure you actually move your photo onto the canvas here. And now we have a photo. Now check down here in the layers palette. Now we have another layer. We have layer 1, and that's our picture that we just added here. So now number 10 is asking you how you would make an image or text layer larger to fit the size of a canvas. This is also how you can rotate. So if I hit Control T, I get this selection here. I have little anchor points on each corner of my photo, and I can now make my photo larger or smaller. But look what's happening. It can get really squished or it can get really stretched out. I don't want that to happen. So if I start over and I hit Control T, I need to hold down the Shift key on my keyboard while I'm stretching it, and that's going to keep my proportions normal. And that's important because I will mark you down for that on some assignments. If your photos get like this all smushed or really stretched out, I'll know that you did not hold Control T. The long way to do that instead of Control T is go to Edit, Free Transform. That will bring up those options too. And if I hover my mouse down here on the corner, then I can rotate my picture if I want, and if I hold Shift, I can make it bigger or smaller. Now, whenever you're making adjustments to a layer, you always need to let Photoshop know you're done. So notice up here at the top, there is what looks like a no smoking sign or a check mark. So I need to hit one of those to let Photoshop know I'm done. If I don't like my rotation here, and I decided I don't want to apply this change, I'm going to hit this no smoking sign and it's going to go back to normal. But let's say I do want to keep my adjustments here. I can hit this check mark and I will say, okay, I'm done. Or you can hit the enter key on your keyboard. So that's actually the answers to number 14. If you finished editing a layer, you need to let Photoshop know you're done. You need to hit that check mark at the top of the screen, and then it will know it's done and you're ready to move on. You also always want to check your layers palette here and make sure that you actually have the layer selected that you're trying to work on. All right, number 11, if you're unsure about what a tool does, you can just hover over it. So the first thing we labeled here was our move tool. If I have my mouse over that, it shows me move tool here. If I want to scroll down here, there's the spot healing brush, all kinds of different tools here. If you just hover your mouse over it, it's going to let you know what it is. And there's actually an option to complete a little quick tutorial on it. So number 11, if you're unsure what to do, hover over that tool and it's going to let you know what to do. Number 12, if you were making a collage and your blank canvas was too small, how can we adjust the canvas size? So I'm actually going to open another picture here and show you kind of what I mean about that. Just open a quick photo here of my corgi photo here. So I'm going to drag and drop this photo onto here. This is really big. I don't have space here. Now, most of the time, you're not going to be allowed to change the dimensions of your canvas because I have you set it specifically for how I'm going to print. Let's go back to layer 0. That's our background layer. And I'm going to go to image canvas size. And here it shows my original 8.5 by 11, but let's say I want to change it to 17 by 11 and I hit OK. Now I have a bigger document to work with. Some of your additional notes should note how to zoom in and out. So now that I've made my canvas bigger, I can't see it all. So I need to zoom out. So I hit Control minus to zoom out, or I can hit Control plus to zoom in if I need to make smaller edits. So Control minus to zoom out and Control plus to zoom in. So I'm going to actually step backwards. I don't want my canvas size bigger. So to undo the last thing I did, you want to make a special note of this. You're going to hit Control Alt Z. That's going to undo the last thing that you did. And I'm going to go back to layer 2 and I'm going to Control T, free transform here, and get my corgi a little bit smaller so that he fits on the same canvas here. Next, we're going to do number 4, which is to change the opacity. So notice how my layers here are overlapping. Down here in my layers palette, I can change the opacity that's right there, and that just changes how see-through something is. So if I move this bar down to around 50%, now my corgi is kind of see-through. It's a little transparent. So that's how you can do like a double exposure, or just if you want to have that kind of ghostly effect on a picture, then you can change the opacity. All right, so we need to save. We've done some things now. So for number 13, we're still working on a project. We're not done. This is what you're going to do the first time you save something. You're going to go to File, Save As, and I'm going to name it something that makes sense. So Photoshop Practice period 3. You never want to actually type a period. You don't want to put PER.3. You don't want to use any punctuation in a file name. Only spaces or dashes like this, or an underscore like that. You don't want to use any punctuation. So don't ever use a period or a comma or an exclamation point. That will mess up your files. Make sure you're always saving to your pictures folder. And also, when the first time you save, so number 13, make sure you're saving as a Photoshop file, a .psd. That means we'll be able to come work on this later, and then I can click save and I'll just hit OK there. But how you want to do things the first time that you save. So let's click back to layer 0. We're going to label our paintbrush tool now. That's this tool here, our brush tool. And if you right click on your canvas, you can change the size of your brush. You can change the hardness of your brush. So if my brush is super hard, it's going to look like this. If my brush is soft, it's going to look more like spray paint. If I want to change the color, now we're going to label the foreground color chip. That's number 2. That's over here. This black chip here, foreground means in the front, or down here at the bottom of your toolbox, you have the foreground color chip. So I can click on that and I can pick a new color. and then I can paint with that color here. So the foreground color chip, you can change the color that you're working with. Now let's say I don't like that, I want to erase it. We want to label the eraser tool. That one's right here, looks like an eraser. And if you right click, you're going to have the same settings with size, and then I can erase. And then notice it's also erasing my background. That's okay. We don't really need our background right now, so not a big deal. But look, it's not going to do anything to your pictures. Your pictures aren't going to go away, just the stuff that you painted on there. Let's say I want to cut out my corgi, so if I click back to my photo over here, I'm going to use the lasso tool. That's another tool you want to label there, the lasso tool. I can cut out around my corgi here. I'm going to just trace around him. Doesn't need to be perfect for this example. When I get back, I'm going to have marching ants. So notice that I have these dashed lines now that are moving. If I right click and make a copy of that layer, now I have this corgi cutout. And notice down here in my layers, I'm just turning that eyeball on and off. I'm going to go back to my move tool, and I'm going to drag my corgi cutout over onto my canvas now. So now I have this corgi cutout. So the lasso tool here is useful if you want to cut out a certain thing on your picture and get rid of that background there. You can also crop your photos. So if I didn't want to cut out, but I wanted to crop, your crop tool's here. You want to label that one. That's part of number 3. And then you can just crop your photo here. And then always, always, always let Photoshop know you're done. So hit that check mark at the top. Now I have a cropped version of that photo that I could get on here as well. Alrighty. The text tool, that's one you want to label. So we're going to go back to layer 0 here. Oh, see, Photoshop's not letting me finish because I didn't hit OK. So now I'll go back to layer 0. I'll grab my text tool. It's towards the bottom here. And I can just click and start typing Photoshop practice. That's hard to see. It's pretty small. So I'm going to make it bigger font. And up here are all my font settings. So I can change my font size. And you can type a bigger number here if you don't want size 72. You can make it as big as you want, and you can change your font color as well. And then I can go grab my move tool, and I can move that around here. And remember, it's showing up underneath my layers. So go back to your layers here, and that's number 15. If your layers are showing up behind something, your layers work just like a stack of paper. So I just need to drag this up so that it shows up on top of my layers there. So now I have that. This is a little small, or my canvas is a little small for this, so I'm going to free transform, Control T, my text here, and I can make it bigger, I can make it smaller, I can stretch it out. So that Control T free transform works on that as well. So one thing you need to remember is to never, never, never save to your downloads folder. That's a big additional note that we made on our last page of additional notes. So let's say we're all done now. This is the last thing we need to do is number 16. We need to save. Let's say this is my final project. First of all, I need to hit Control S. I need to save this Photoshop document version so that if I need to come back and make changes later, like if I turned it in and I missed something in the directions, you'll be able to come back and fix this. So hit Control Save or go to File Save, and it'll save this PSD version. And then when you're done, we're going to File Save As again. Let's add the word final to the end of our file name. That way, when you're turning into Google Classroom, you'll know which file to turn in because it says final. And here's the big thing. You always want to turn in your files as a JPEG. PSD files are just when we're still working. JPEGs are for when we're all done. And that's something that's on every rubric. You always want to turn your files in correctly or you'll be marked down. So never turn in as a PSD file. Your PSD file is just for when you're working, the JPEGs when you're all done. And you'll click Save. And then this setting pops up. It's just asking about your image quality. It should be high. If it accidentally says low, you can just drag it to high or maximum. I want the highest quality photos for printing, and you'll hit OK there. And then now you should have a Photoshopped version and a PSD version. So if I just open my pictures folder here, notice these little PSD icons show that it's PSD Photoshop file, and the JPEG versions show a little preview. So if I double click that and open it, let me get this a little smaller so we can see, there is my PSD version. It opens up in just a picture preview. So hopefully that gives you a good rundown of these very basic tools, and this will help you with your first project.